As he said, we are both archivists working here in Oklahoma City, and I contacted Mallory about this session because we each have a group of papers that were created and collected by Jimmy Stewart, and I worked with them here, and then I saw some at the public library too, and it just made me very excited because I think he is a under-celebrated person in Oklahoma City history and has had a great impact on civil rights movement as well as just all different areas of public life and economy and all sorts of things. So I'm a big fan of Jimmy Stewart, in short. And so I'm happy to talk about him today and those materials that we have here available to researchers. So this is just a little rundown of each of our collections. The materials that are at the public library were actually donated there when they were building the Ralph Ellison branch, which is just down the street here on 23rd. And that building includes a Roscoe Dunjee room, and Ralph Ellison reached out to his friend, Mr. Stewart, and said, would you donate some papers to start a collection there? And so he did. And those materials include letters that he wrote, a great deal of correspondence between him and local people and civil rights leaders and activists nationwide. Also, a number of speeches that he delivered, notes on events that he helped host and run, different committees, and there are also some photographs and a good amount of publications that he collected throughout the time that he was working in the public sphere. And there are 17 document boxes of those. And I'm gonna let Mallory talk about the materials here at the Historical Society.
Okay, so the materials that are here at the OHS were donated by Jimmy Stewart, his son, in 2005, and we've got 10 document boxes, and they include correspondence, a lot of his writings. We have his some papers on his military service with the United States Marine Corps. We've got a ton of speeches, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading those as I was looking through this. And then we just have a lot of his NAACP reports and things like that. And you can find our finding aid online if you want kind of a full rundown of what we have here.
So just a little background about Jimmy Stewart, if you're not aware of his history. He did grow up here in Oklahoma City and was a childhood friend of Ralph Ellison. They grew up in Westtown, which is a neighborhood that's north of the river and west. It's kind of between Western and Classen was that area. And it was a mixed race neighborhood, a lower class, and they had a number of issues going on in their community. And Ralph Ellison and Jimmy went to the same elementary school later where they encountered Roscoe Dunjee and some other people that we'll talk about in a minute. He was the youngest son in a family with 6 kids, and his father died when he was young, so he ended up staying with his mom when she moved to Wichita, and he went to an integrated public school where he played on the football team and he ran track, and he experienced a type of life and social life there that was different than he had ever experienced in Oklahoma City. So when he graduated, he returned to Oklahoma City and immediately started being active in the public sphere and being vocal about integration of schools specifically. He worked for the Oklahoma Natural Gas and started there in 1937 and was hired to work on the janitorial crew, but I think that lasted maybe a month or two because he quickly moved up to different positions and within 4 years was managing a new branch that O&G opened on the east side of Oklahoma City. And I think that speaks to his personality and his very outgoing way of just talking with people and being very personable and upfront. He was a very charismatic individual from what I can gather from his speeches. What Mallory said is absolutely true. He just reading the speeches as they're written on paper, it's really entertaining, and lots of jokes, which I always love as well. So he was a really interesting individual and worked for O&G his whole career. As Mallory mentioned, he did serve for a few years in the Marine Corps and retired from the natural gas company in 1976 after many years working there. So I included some material about Roscoe Dunjee because of their relationship, and many of the things that Jimmy did were part of that mentorship and that friendship that was that he and Roscoe shared. Roscoe Dunjee established the first black newspaper in Oklahoma, the Black Dispatch, in 1915, and he really pioneered the outspoken style of editorialism that Jimmy Stewart followed in his footsteps with the column, Jimmy Says, that was featured in the Black Dispatch for 33 years running, that Roscoe Dunjee encouraged him to write. So they were personal friends. These two photographs here are from the materials donated to the public library. One is Roscoe and his two siblings, Irving and Priscilla, as young children. And the one next to it is a wedding photo, and that's the caption from the back there. It said, "Editor Dunjee give away his cousin, Carolyn Dunjee, to Horton Kelly in December of 1959. And so this was some evidence of their closeness and ties to each other. Do you want to talk about this one? There's a lot of words, I know, but I pulled out some on this side from the letter. I'll let Mallory talk.
Roscoe Dunjee obviously was an amazing force in Oklahoma City. He kind of paved the way for Jimmy Stewart's activism in many ways. They were friends, he supported him, also got him involved with the Black Dispatch, kind of was like, hey, you're gonna write a column for me, come on. The Black Dispatch has had a really great legacy. And just a side note, you can find most of those issues on the Gateway to Oklahoma History if you ever want to go and read his columns there. You can see here that, he really kind of pushed him into civil rights and kind of gave him a voice there. Roscoe Dunjee and his, I feel like he's also kind of underrepresented and under-celebrated as a person, especially in Oklahoma history, but also civil rights history. What's the next one? Do you want to do this one?
You can go ahead.
Okay. When he started writing for the Weekly Dispatch or the Black Dispatch, he did Jimmy Says, which we had a picture of his business card on the front of our presentation. He moved into working with the NAACP and was the president from 1942 to 1959. And a lot of his reports and his work is found in the papers here in the Historical Society. He also did a whole lot of other things. He was leadership in a bunch of different human rights committees and groups, and he was appointed by the governor to Commission on Human Rights and Ethics in State Government.
Do you remember which ballot?
I do not remember.
I think it was Pertlet, maybe?
It's okay.
Among the correspondence, you can see a number of governors and mayors and other leaders represented. There's a letter from Richard Nixon in some of the papers that we have at the public library, just responses to letters that Jimmy sent out to people, because he was never afraid to open up and talk to someone and to share his opinion with people. So he wrote letters and sent telegrams freely to a lot of people, and while we don't have always that outgoing correspondence, the responses from them showing that evidence of his relationships is pretty interesting. So I mentioned education earlier, and that is something that Jimmy Stewart was very active in advocating for school integration and equity in buildings, not only teaching what they taught in the classroom, but what type of classroom it was, and that it was a up to standard facility. He was behind different campaigns in Oklahoma City to improve Douglas High School, as well as he was on the team that helped Ada Lewis Hipple get into and through college. I'm not reading any of my notes that I wrote down. So both collections of Stewart's papers include remarks that he delivered to students, their parents, teachers, community government, and business owners about how education is supported, delivered, and preserved in the Black community. Jimmy successfully campaigned Oklahoma City government for improvements to Douglas High School, and he worked with Thurgood Marshall, Roscoe Dunjee, Ulysses S. Tate, and the NAACP National President Roy Wilkins to achieve racial segregation of schools from primary grades through college. He also, I didn't find a way to put this in on the slides, but something else, that he was part of an editorial team in the 1970s that proofed and helped get published a history of the African American people in Oklahoma, which is used in schools, and it's specifically designed for that audience. Mr. Stewart gave a lot of talks to students, and he was very adamant about students understanding the history of all people, and that was part of what these two little snippets of the remarks here are from the Historical Society papers.
Right, and this one is one of his reports that he wrote to the NAACP that came out of the Historical Society. He was a prolific corresponder, as we've kind of mentioned, and there's a lot of correspondence between him and his other members of the NAACP, both local and national. And so there's a lot of his handwritten reports in there talking about what's going on here, what needs to happen, if progress has been made, things like that. And as you go on and read these reports, you can tell he's very charismatic, and we have a interview with him on our Historical Society collection. I don't know if it's on YouTube yet, but so just listening to him and reading you can just tell how very passionate he was about all of this stuff. And so reading some of this gives you a really good idea about his personality. This is another letter that actually, I think this is the one that had the best quote I've seen in a very long time about Jim Crow, but his stinking, decomposing body is still here, and I just thought that was amazing. So, it's things like that where you go through and you're just fascinated by the way he writes. But yeah, you can go through and see all these and see that he was very, passionate about it.